Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, I know we've already talked about Elgar's most important work, that is, the March of the Mughal Emperors from the Crown of India suite, and although nothing he wrote rises to that level of excellence, I think that it is appropriate to talk about some of his more minor or occasional, even thrown off, unimportant pieces. So I figured we would consider today the Symphony Number 2, a slight jeu d'esprit that has been recorded many, many, many times, even though its importance can't possibly match the March of the Mughal Emperors. It's been recorded really terribly, too. I mean, there's some awful ones, some real stinkers out there. I mean, let me start with just mentioning some of the more horrific performances that you want to avoid at all costs. I mean, at the top of the list, there's Yevgeny Svetlanov. Oh my God, what a horror show that is. I remember vividly reading a wonderful review of that on LP in Fanfare magazine that began with, "If you believe that Elgar's music is a decadent relic of a dead empire, best gone and forgotten, then you might enjoy this bloated and obscene performance from Yevgeny Svetlanov." That about described it. It really did. It described it very, very well. After that, I think we have to talk about Giuseppe Sinopoli with the Philharmonia on DG. Oh my goodness, they are wretched. They are slow, soft-edged, very self-indulgent, very decadent. Then there was Bryden Thompson on Chandos, those sort of big, blowsy, again, very, very slow and puffily recorded, not very good at all. Chandos keeps trying. They have Gibson, now they have Edward Gardner. Those aren't very good. Those are the opposite of Thompson. Those are light and fast and, again, sort of to hear the influence of what you might call almost the period instrument crowd, lean textures, quick tempos, no passion or vocal cantabile at all. Oh my God, they're just horrible. Sakari Oramo's done some on Bis. They've been dreadful. It really is sort of kind of bleak. Daniel Barenboim's remaking them now with the Staatskapelle Berlin. Those aren't very successful. They've gotten rave reviews in some corners. I don't dispute that, but I find them unconvincing. His first performances were on Sony, I believe with the London Phil or the Philharmonia, one of those, they're all the same. What does it matter? One of those London orchestras. And they were pretty good. They really were. Not fabulous, but pretty good. His remakes are neither. They're neither here nor there, although because he's doing them in Germany and whatnot, they're going to get a lot of attention in the UK. And as, Elgar finally is achieving the international, whatever cachet that he deserves. And, the fact of the matter is that Elgar's Second Symphony is a very complex work. It really is. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's a very complex work emotionally. So different from the elegant simplicity of the March of the Mughal Emperors, of course. And it really helps and has helped historically to make performances in the UK because the English orchestras know how it goes. It's that simple. And that allows conductors to come in and interpret as they please in connection with an orchestra that's familiar with the work. Because, conductors get way too much credit for the positive aspects of a performance. 9 times out of 10, the orchestra knows the music better than the conductor does. And if he just stays out of the way and keeps them together, they're going to do a great job. Unfortunately, there are a lot of conductors, particularly today, who are interventionist, and they do get in the way. And the result is horrifying. And that's what happens, for example, with Sinopoli. It's just miserable. And so, I'm a little of two minds about recordings of this work. I'm going to take you through about, I don't know, maybe we'll go through a dozen or so, some by the same people more than once. There are some superb ones, and they are worth considering, and some recently very, very good ones. but just a lot of dreck out there. There really is. Remember Haitink doing it? Holy cow. Unbelievable. Just unbelievably bad. So let's talk about what I think are the good ones and forget about the bad ones. I just made this little list for you so that you know what to avoid, you know? But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All Elgar performances start with the great man himself, Sir Edward Elgar. And, you know, his performances are quite marvelous as regards tempo, shaping, and certain aspects of playing style, like string portamento and stuff like that. They are completely useless in terms of balance and texture and dynamic range, and that's a big deal in the Second Symphony. And I'm going to tell you why. One of the most fascinating aspects of this symphony is the theme that you first hear in the development section of the first movement. Now, this symphony is, broadly speaking, in cyclical form. It has a theme and has a motto theme, which Elgar wrote, quoting Shelley, "Rarely, rarely comest thou, spirit of delight," something like that, you know. And that little bit is right at the beginning. You hear, it's the first thing you hear. Da 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 da. That's it. It's just that little bit. It's that little piece, and you hear it again in the third movement. Ba-da-dum bum bum, ba-da-dum bum bum. That's a transformation of it. It's transformed throughout the symphony. Now, the spirit of delight is not the only cyclical element in this symphony. The other main cyclical element occurs in the development section of the first movement. You hear this incredibly sensual, sexy theme, and I'm going to play it for you now. Now, Elgar called that an evil influence wandering through the garden. Why is it evil? Well, because it's sexy. And, you know, he's British and sex is evil. I mean, that's just what we have to accept about English music. We all know it's sexless. I mean, we just did a video on Britain's operas. They're sexless. I mean, and the sex that's there is evil. It really is, for the most part. So, you know, there's this, I can't get into the psychology of, you know, the British mind when it comes to music and sex, but let's just say that there really isn't much, and when there is, it tends to be kind of kinky, and Elgar is a classic Victorian or Edwardian in that respect. So we get this kinky, sexy theme, and it occurs twice. Now, the second time, it has less sex, less of the lusciousness and the decadent feel and that rapturous quality, and a lot more menace, but it's subtle. It's little snarls in the brass, and behind the theme in the cellos, you hear this very quiet tap, 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 tap. And I'm going to show you a bit of score so that you can see what it looks like. It's created by pizzicato basses and a snare drum, quadruple piano with bass drum on the offbeats, quadruple piano, and the timpani. And that is impossible to hear in Elgar's recording in the correct balances and the way it should sound. And it's really very difficult to hear in a lot of modern recordings too, because it's quadruple piano. But you have to hear it. You have to hear that pump, bump, 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 that tapping behind the theme, because this is the kernel of evil, which is going to become a horrifying reality in the third movement, which is a rondo. And in that movement, one of the episodes features this tune. I mean, the music is kind of meandering about at that point, and all of a sudden it latches on to this theme. And the theme comes back, and it comes in this radiant version for the full string section with this pulsation behind it that at first seems quite innocent. But then the rhythm gets taken over by the bass drum, the snare drum, the tambourine, and there's a cymbal crash that comes into it. And what Elgar said about that passage is that it was like when you have a fever in the middle of the night and your head is pounding and it's making you mad. You know, the pounding becomes greater and greater and greater, and it's a demonic vision, and it's a fabulous passage. It's often underplayed, and that makes me crazy. Not because it's percussion, it's because it's a triple forte climax, really in some ways the climax of the whole symphony, and you cannot possibly hit it hard enough. And if you look at the way Elgar writes it, he insists that only the last 9 notes of the percussion have a diminuendo. Until then, they are at triple forte and staying there. And this crescendo has to emerge from the orchestra in general and just overwhelm everything. And there are few performances that actually realize it successfully. And when they do, it's fabulous. Most performers make the diminuendo too early, or they don't sustain the climax the way they're supposed to. It's so frustrating. It really is. So that's an issue that I think you'll see and listen for, and you should listen for when you hear these performances. And the ones I'm going to talk about, I think, in the main, get it right. The other big issue with interpretation in this symphony is the finale, because the finale is like the apotheosis of the sequence. It's all based on do 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 do. I mean, that sequence gets repeated 350,968,427,502.7 times over the course of the finale. So you got to keep it moving, and you got to keep it interesting. And Elgar's own performance is useful for that, for pacing, for that kind of thing, but not for the textural and dynamic issues, which are just as important in realizing the symphony successfully. So now let's talk about the other recordings that we have after Elgar's own. Well, you have to talk next about son of Elgar, Sir Adrian Boult, who recorded this symphony about 37 times. No, actually, there are only 3 of them. 2 of them are in the Elgar edition. One was from 1946. The other was 1970-something, 75, 76. For some reason, it took him 2 years to do it. Fortunately, the tempi are not that slow. And then he did them on Lyrita. And they're all very good. I mean, what are you going to say? He knew Elgar. He knew the music. He loved the music. He didn't like the first symphony as much as the second. He always did the second very beautifully. These are extremely idiomatic performances, authentic to the last degree, very convincing, and as usual with Boult, a little bit on the slack side, perhaps a little easygoing. He's not quite as into the darker underbelly of the work, but he never stints on the climaxes. He really doesn't. And he and the orchestra know it and love it, and it's a schmooze fest, and it's fine. It's fine. However, a performance that has received a lot of acclaim, but which I think is pretty dismal, is Barbarolli. Sir John, well, his problem here is this. He was the leader, as you know, the conductor of the Halle Orchestra in Manchester, an orchestra which, thanks to his tireless, unstinting efforts, he raised from 4th rate to 3rd rate. I mean, that's the bottom line. His best recordings were all made in London with the Philharmonia, London Symphony, one of the major London orchestras. Why? Because they were just better. It's that simple. Now, he felt great loyalty to the Halle, which I understand, and he insisted on making the Second Symphony with the Halle because it was his orchestra, and that's the problem. It's not very good. It's not well played. It's not well recorded. The big climax in the third movement goes for 0. You'd never know it's happening. It's terrible. I mean, it's Barbaroli. It has its affectionate moments. It's lovely, lovely passages. He knows how to do it. He knows how to pace it. But my God, he needed a better orchestra. They were not a very good orchestra. And the woodwinds, too. I mean, the snake charmer oboes and the intonational issues and ensemble. It's not terrible, but it could have been so much better, and in these other versions, it is so much better. So now I'm going to talk about the really, really great versions, one of which it's sitting in a box over there, so I'm not hauling it out. Colin Davis with the LSO on the LSO label. Now, Davis also did Elgar, plenty of Elgar in his life, but his last recording of the Second Symphony on the LSO's own label was superb, absolutely first rate, and one of the better sonic jobs that came from that label, because of course they were all recorded live in the Barbican, which has a dry as dust acoustic for the most part. But that's a great version, the Colin Davis Elgar 2 with the London Symphony on its own label. Now the others, which I all have sitting here, are, there you go, Schulte with the LPO. This was Boult's orchestra, remember, the London Philharmonic, and he came in and whipped them into a sharper version of themselves. I love these performances. They are brisk, no nonsense, completely not English. They are exciting and spontaneous and passionate, and really some of Schulte's best work, and you really have to hear them. His Elgar was marvelous in London. It really was. And again, the orchestra knew it, and he was able to come in and impose his will on them, and the union of the two threw off sparks. It was really, really terrific. Also an excellent version, and it's one that people are likely to overlook, and they shouldn't, is Edward Downes with the BBC Philharmonic. This was his orchestra. He did that terrific. He did the Korngold Symphony, the Glière Third. He made some beautiful records with them for Chandos. This was no less successful. The engineering's a little low level. You got to turn it up, but this is the performance that I used for the sound samples in this talk. And listen to how well he does the climax of the third movement, with the percussion emerging from the texture and that pounding that really has to hit you hard. It's extremely well done. I enjoy this performance very, very much. Again, it's not the most hard-hitting, you might call. It's not as rhythmically taut as Schulte or the ones by some of the other conductors we're going to talk about, but it's a beautiful, knowing, very, very listenable performance. It hits all the right points in the symphony, and the finale particularly has a very, very nice flow. It's extremely well judged, so that's worth considering. Also an Elgar guy was Andrew Davis, who made 5 billion recordings. He also did these symphonies for Lyrita. This was his last version with the BBC Symphony. I think he's going to probably do them again for Chandos. Who knows? It's just endless, isn't it? If you're an English label, you have an English conductor, an English orchestra, you got to do Elgar symphonies with all of them, with every possible combination. It's nuts. But this is first class, absolutely first class, and the original Teldec recording was terrific. So Andrew Davis with the BBC Symphony, as opposed to the Philharmonic, the better of the two orchestras actually, is excellent, absolutely excellent from soup to nuts. definitely worth considering. However, there are two recordings that I think are the best of the bunch, and they're more recent, and they are phenomenal because they are texturally aware, fabulously recorded, absolutely gorgeous in every respect. First, who do you think? Charles Mackerras with the Royal Philharmonic. Oh, this is great. You know, to make these recordings, Mackerras went back to Elgar's recordings and he marked every bit of portamento in the violin parts and had them reproduce it exactly. You know, and he also conducted with a sort of romantic flexibility of tempo, which is absolutely wonderful, especially in the rondo and also in the finale, because it prevents that endless buildup of sequences from sounding stiff. This is a great Elgar 2. Again, for some reason, it didn't get a lot of attention when it came out. I don't know why. I mean, because, you know, you're competing with, you know, Sir Adrian and Sir John. Oh, the classic Barbaroli with the Halle. Oh, you know. Come on, guys. Open your ears and listen. Absolutely first rate. There isn't anything earlier that's better. You know, I mean, it's terrific. But my favorite, and what I think is the best, is this the Philharmonia or with the LPO? It's hard to say. It's the LPO, yes. The LPO. Leonard Slatkin. Another absolutely first-class version. It has the most powerful climax in the third movement, which isn't the main issue, but Slatkin's Elgar was just really aware, smart, intelligent, passionate, and very, very idiomatic, because he had the London Orchestra under his baton. And I just think that they got along really well together. I don't know if they really did. I mean, they may have hated each other for all I know, but the combination was just magical in Elgar's music, because, you know, here is a symphony that just seems to play itself. You know, all of the tempos are just right. All of the balances, the climaxes are unerringly well timed. That's Barenboim's problem in his Elgar 2 remake. He mistimes things. You know, he's either rushing or holding back at the wrong moment. The music has its own, you know, natural sense of flow, and you have to capture that and project it in your performance. And Slatkin does that incredibly well. So if you're going to get a modern Elgar 2, then my votes, if you don't have Andrew Davis, which is in that British line box, which I also talked about in a video, which is definitely worth having. Their performances there are generally first rate. But Mackerras and Slatkin. The Mackerras is also on Decca Eloquence, Australian Eloquence, with the First Symphony and some other stuff, cheap. So you might be able to get it that way. The Slatkin's just been reissued in a bargain box. Slatkin conducts Elgar. If it's still available, who knows? But these things are around. You should be able to get them. And so if you're going to get Elgar's less important works, starting with the Second Symphony, those are the versions I would recommend. I think maybe if I have time, I'll take you through one of his, you know, really occasional pieces, like The Dream of Gerontius or something. You know, we'll have to see. But for the Second Symphony, these are your recommendations. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much. And if you enjoyed this chat, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Bye-bye.